Welcome back, chess fans. Let's get back into it. Okay, we've got the last game of the first bracket. Let's go back and check to see our board. We've got Joseph versus Dell here, and we need to resolve that one before we can move on. So let's jump into the game. We've got Joe with the black pieces, Dell with the white pieces, going into the Scandinavian defense. I know nothing about this. We're both learning. Okay, so let's see. Let's take this move by move here. White moves e4, trying to challenge the center. d5 is the response, fighting back at the opponent. Now this pawn's undefended, so you either have to take the pawn or defend it. Otherwise, at the moment, it's just hanging. And you're also offering white the chance to take the pawn. And that's going to cause black to have to take back with the queen and leave the queen in the center of the board. And then you get to develop your knight with some initiative, with a tempo. You bring your knight out to c3. You threaten the d5 square, and the queen has to decide if is it going to move back to the starting position, or maybe move to the corner of the board somewhere. So we instead have defending the pawn, and takes, and a little intermediate move here, not taking back immediately, but throwing in a check. Now this might be a little bit risky, because if you block with c6, this bishop has to move again, and black has a chance to defend that pawn. So you're going to have some trouble winning it back right away. It's not going to be as easy. And that's indeed what happens. White's forced to move, and now you have an opportunity to defend the pawn. Black opts for initiative, getting some piece development. Queen eyeing up some important squares. It's a few moves away, but something like this might be a dangerous attack here. White says, you're not the only one who can develop to the center of the board. I'm also developing my queen. Only problem is the bishop and queen are staring at each other, and the bishop has the first move. So black misses the opportunity to take the queen undefended, but defends the bishop. And now white says, aha, it was all a ruse to recapture the pawn. Black develops, attacking white's queen now, and white has to move out of the way. So gathering a tempo there, tempo meaning gaining some time, right? This development move came with time, because the queen had to move again, and now you get another move. This move opens up the bishop, allowing for some interesting options here. White developing their own bishop, maybe to some interesting squares. And black wants piece development, but can't bring it to the desirable c6 square, because the pawn is on that square. Can't bring it to d7, because the bishop is on that square, so opts for the only other square available, possibly thinking about castling queenside. This piece is not horrible here. It only has one square to go to. White could probably take the opportunity to block off that square, and then the knight loses a lot of its mobility. Might have to move again to try and get to a better square. Could be the plan anyway, though. White develops the knight. Good practice, preparing castling. And black says, I don't want to castle. Let's trade bishops. Can't see what the point of this move is. I think a better move was just a castle, taking advantage of here White's bishop is quite bad. It doesn't matter where it goes. It's got very little mobility. It's staring at reinforced pawns on every side here, and the piece isn't very good. Now, I guess the counterpoint to this is that black's white bishop isn't very good either. It's stuck behind the wall of pawns and can't really do anything. So this move does make some sense, to maybe trade off your bad piece unfortunately, it's for white's bad piece too. So it's just kind of a trade. You are giving white the opportunity to capture this pawn, and maybe improve your knight in the process. Also, capture, you don't really want to capture back with your king because you lose your castling rights. So maybe the knight has to go back here. And then, it feels like the knight is moving backwards a little bit, which is maybe a little bit counterproductive. So, yeah, I probably would have liked to see developing the bishop or castling. Okay, white chooses to defend the bishop. Also blocking in some of the escape squares. Now, it's not a problem here because this pawn move can't jump through the queen, but and this square is defended anyway. But you always have to be careful. You should be careful about moving this pawn in front of the bishop because you take away the bishop's escape square and leaving it with a lot fewer options. Black, doesn't want to take at this point because the knight gets a tempo on the queen, but probably castling here is still the best idea. Black captures the pawn that was defended here. Slight downside of this is that maybe you develop the knight, except, wait a second here. It's attacked twice, it only defended once. Okay, so this is a clear win. Black can't recapture because the queen would just take it. So this is a good move, winning a pawn. White's looking for some tactics to kind of jump into place and recapture this pawn. Black now might want to capture this knight. In fact, that's still only defended once and attacked twice by both the bishop and the queen. So this tactic doesn't quite work. It works in black's favor. And in fact, black does capture it. He's got two good reasons to take it. One is defending the pawn, and two, because it's not defended adequately. White, instead of recapturing, realizes he just lost the piece and develops instead, which is actually a good idea. You don't want to trade pieces when you're down. Development here can help you decide whether or not you want to castle kingside or queenside. If you're down in points, you need to make up for it in piece activity. Otherwise, you're going to lose the game. So this bishop move is a good move. It still might be coming with capture here, but seeing as how this bishop has no moves, but I still like the development move. And in fact, we do see the capture, and we probably want to see castle kingside here. Maybe planning to bring this rook out, get this rook very active on the semi-open file. That pawn is also attacked by the queen, so when this queen moves out of the way, you're going to win the pawn behind it, start to get some of that material back. Instead, we see black taking an aggressive shot here, threatening to win the rook, also threatening a pawn. White probably needs to castle here, give up the pawn and save the rook. Castling will connect the two rooks and they'll be safe. That's what we see. And we see the pawn drop. Now the bishop is threatened. White counterattacks. And this is a good move because not only does it win the pawn, but it also comes with the attack on the rook and the knight. Black's going to have to resolve that before going on the offense. I really wouldn't want to see allow this capture as black. It comes with some checks. The queen's going to come back, going to throw some more checks in there. It's probably going to win the knight too. This is very uncomfortable. You may even just want to retreat and defend all the pieces and prevent white from causing havoc in your camp. Instead, we see this, which also this is defended by the queen and defends the rook. So this is a great move that defends all the pieces. Well done. We have white capturing the undefended pawn, and now probably the bishop will fall. Maybe something like defending the bishop was better, but the queen actually attacks both of these pieces. through one of them through the other. So in this situation, you want to be able to move one piece to protect the other, but there's no way to do that. Maybe a better idea is to move the queen back and guard the bishop, or to move one of the rooks to guard the bishop. That way, you can't capture either piece. But this allows the capture of the bishop, which black graciously declines, and instead goes for the knight, probably the piece black wanted all along. Knight moves again, and now as black, you've got to be getting a little bit nervous. You don't really like the knight controlling these squares around your king, and the queen being so close. And the big problem here is that this move is protected by the queen and cuts off the support of the c7 knight from the queen. So white's next threat here is to capture on c7. So this is a good threat. Maybe black needs to connect the two knights together to keep them connected. It could be tricky, though. You could start to see some tactics. Definitely, these rooks coming in could cause a lot of problems for black. We do see the knight connecting the other knight, and we do see the rook coming. So now the queen's got to move out of the way, and this rook kind of x-rays everything all the way down here. Capturing this knight with the rook might not be a bad idea. Even though it's defended, the queen could potentially win two knights for the cost of a rook, which is a good exchange. Queen wins a pawn to get out of the way. And now we see a move that moves the knight out of the way to a square that it's protected and opens the path for the rook to take this knight. So we do see that. Probably want something like bishop guarding that knight now. We do see that, okay? And now the king has really got to be castling. This is really uncomfortable for position for black to be in. And I already think he doesn't have time. Now queen c8 is the most logical next move. It's a check, and the king's only got one space to go to. Queen can come in again with check again. King's got to move out of the way somewhere. And at the very least, the bishop falls. There might be something else there. Queen goes the other way, grabbing some material. Unfortunately, it's defended by the knight, and black finds it. Is there a tactic here, though? Now this capture, which is a sacrifice, opens up the line of the rook. Rook can come in with a check, and let's look at that line. Rook comes in. Now this didn't happen, but it could have happened. King is forced to move out of the way, and then the other rook falls. And now this sacrifice doesn't look so crazy, because you've got a lot of potential threats here. White's threatening check on the next move and winning the other knight, and there's a lot of counterplay here. That's not what we saw happen. But going back to the game, we saw rook fe1. This guy. Black gets his castling in, now threatening the knight. White develops a piece, not seeing the threat, and the knight drops. White coming in, threatening the bishop now. Black not defending the bishop, but counter-attacking the other bishop. Now, when you're ahead in development, like Joseph is here, you don't mind the trade. You're saying to white, go ahead and capture the bishop, because I'm just going to capture your bishop. I'm happy for the trade. I'm happy to make room for my king to get out. If you should ever get a piece to the back rank, I'm going to avoid the back rank mate. So I really like this move. It accomplishes multiple things. It gives it's called a luft. It makes a luft for the king to escape, and balances out the attack. White saves the bishop, and black saves his. Rook coming down to the dreaded seventh file, where it tends to be a menace on the enemy's camp. In this case, the piece is not safe. The square is defended, and black, if he sees it, can capture it. The problem is white is really low on time. Got 20 seconds left on the clock. Hard to see these kind of things. Hard to check every move when you're that low on time. You need to kind of go on instinct, and sometimes you just don't have the time to check everything. Black makes a good choice of capturing with the other knight, and now the knight that used to be trapped on the A8 square with very little prospect is back into the game. So that's a very good choice. White's in this position needs to find a move, only has 27 seconds to do it, can't come up with anything that makes sense, and it's easy to see why. There's very little you can do to get back into the game. Maybe put some pressure here, but the knights are well defended. You can't go to any of these squares because they're all covered by black's pieces. The rook's not really staring at anything here. He's not threatening anything here. He's not really threatening anything here. This square is not safe, and neither is this one. So, as white with 20 seconds to decide what to do, you don't have much to work with. And so the first game goes to Joe. All right, let's go on to game 2. Now, Joe with the white pieces, playing d4, queen's pawn opening, looks like the London. A little bit different. Usually with the London we see c3 instead of this. Another favorite line of mine is to play the pawn up first, and then after black moves to put the knight here. Now, this pawn, the c pawn's not stuck behind the knight for the game. But instead we saw this, and we'll keep an eye out later to see if this c pawn is could be better suited somewhere else on the board. Later on, it'd be interesting. Okay, so we get similar position to London. Oh, here we have an aggressive attack here, putting some pressure on these pieces. Notice that the c7 square is already attacked by 2 pieces. There is in fact a threat here. The threat is taking with the knight and checking both the king and the rook. Black can't take with the queen because black will lose the queen, and it's not worth the knight. So black would be forced to move the king and end up losing the rook. So this is a solid threat here, and usually the knight would come to a6 to defend this square, but the knight's already moved. So you need something else. Maybe bishop d6 here. The biggest problem with that I see is it drops a pawn after all the pieces take. Black's in check and has lost the c7 pawn. Instead we see a counterattack, and probably the response is going to be c3 now, kind of getting the ideal structure. This is generally not a good move for black because you're sort of helping out white's development. You're kind of giving away a tempo, giving away a move. And this kind of ignores... I see the idea. It doesn't ignore it. The idea is to come back and guard the pawn from this direction. I was expecting this way, but black here is being ambitious and saying, I want to defend the pawn, but I don't want to give up a piece. So this may have solved all black's problems. I take it all back. This is a very good move. White develops. That attack's not going nowhere at the moment. Black moving his knight to what he hopes is a better square, possibly eyeing up this one. But the problem is it cuts off the defense of c7. What was a second ago a brilliant defense, now we've kind of tripped over ourselves, and This is now not going to work, and now white spots it and gets the tactic in, attacking both the king and the rook, and there's not enough pieces to guard this square. Black says to heck with it, I'll sacrifice the queen, I don't want to lose my rook. And right, so right off the hop, Joe's up a good chunk of material. Bishop just retreats when attacked, maybe going to trade another piece. And we have knight to e4 here. Nice square for the black knight to be in. Keeping an eye on important squares. Usually, white wants to try and kick that knight out if he can. It's too good a square for black to be able to keep it. Throws in a check. King moves back. And now you have to look at where what the squares the bishops are covering. There's a lot of squares here that the king can't move to. If you can find a way to cover e7 and deliver check, you could have the game here. Maybe alternatively covering c7, taking here and then coming back for check. There's only one square left to cover. White might be able to figure this out. Okay, spotting a piece with not a lot of squares. We talked about this last game. A bishop that couldn't move back, blocked by its own piece. White spots it this time, and maybe it wasn't, couldn't act on it last time, but spots the tactic, traps the piece in the corner, traps the bishop in the corner. Best move for the bishop now is to sacrifice itself for a pawn, otherwise you get nothing for it. Black's idea is a nice one, trying to throw in a counterattack. But it shouldn't be too much of a threat to white. White just needs to move the piece somewhere, and you'll still win the trapped piece. Unfortunately, this isn't a safe square for the bishop, as you can just capture it right away. And black maybe panicked and moved the other knight, trying to make an escape square for the bishop. Fortunately, this gives the opportunity back to white. Best move was just capturing right away. It attacks the second piece. If white captures, black captures, white captures, black captures, and it's actually fairly even. I think white loses a pawn, but not a bishop. But black has some. Sorry, black loses a pawn and not. No, white loses a pawn, but maybe black comes out on top. Okay, I lost count. And this is also good for black because it activates the rook on the side. So this would have been the best way to play. Instead, we saw the knight move, and now at this point, black's got a bishop hanging and white's got a bishop hanging, so it might still work out. White captures here, and now I think black's best move is to capture this bishop, threatening the second one. Otherwise, you're not going to keep the material. Okay, this might actually work too. This bishop is still being attacked, so if captures, you're still okay. And misses the opportunity to win back the bishop. Now the bishop moves, and this is to a protected square. So instead of trading, black goes and takes the pawn that's not defended, attacking the queen. Queen moves to attack the knight. Knight goes back, and white castles. Okay, so white's up a lot of material here. Basically, the whole queen. We got a knight for a knight and a bishop for a bishop. Two rooks are still on the board. Pawns are even, although white's pawns are doubled. So the biggest difference here is black's down the queen. We got captures. And another knight move, attacking the queen again. White gobbles up the pawn and attacks the knight again. And probably the knight's going to have to move back. And the thing I don't like about here is I think black's waited too long to castle. Can't castle this way because the bishop's in the way. Castling this way still leaves the king out in the open. And white has got 3 major pieces developed with easy lines for the rooks to come out. This bishop hasn't been developed yet. Black's kind of getting trapped in the middle. And this is a imposing threat. The rook sees the king through the bishop. All the bishop has to do is move, and the bishop can move and capture something. A move like this, it comes with a double check. Black can't even block that. It just has to move out of the way, and then all hell's going to break loose. The queen's going to come in and to somewhere, maybe not this square, but queen's going to move, come in, cause some problems. Okay, probably needed to immediately castle, get out of the line of sight of the rook. It doesn't see it, and we do get the double check attack. Now the king can't castle out of danger, so castling's no longer an option. You can't castle through check or out of check. Black's in check here in 2 different ways, and castling just can't happen. So king has to move and loses castling rights, and now the rook's trapped in the corner, has no good squares to get out. And yeah, this is sort of what I mean about waiting too long to get the king to safety. Next rook can come out. Maybe a queen can come in. Maybe queen here. I'm not exactly sure. Capturing a pawn is a fine idea. And this doesn't counterattack because the queen has access to it now. Misses the opportunity to pick up the rook, instead opting to defend the bishop. And now these squares are both defended by black's pieces, so the queen doesn't have any immediate wins. Although maybe an idea like attacking the knight and trying to distract it from the defense. If black takes this, I would respond with attacking the knight, trying to lure the knight away and come in for checkmate. Except we all missed, admit it, you missed it too. We all missed that this move defending the bishop put the queen in the line of fire. And suddenly our 9-point lead disappears. Okay, we still got a 6-point lead. We can still do this, but the problem is the bishop's still hanging. And now we've only got a 3-point lead, and the game has turned around quite a bit. King's still trapped in the middle. Black probably needs to... there isn't quite a mate here, but this is actually pretty scary, and black misses the idea. So this doesn't quite work. I was looking at king goes back and check in the back. Unfortunately, yeah, this does work because this is checkmate. Now, the problem is that the king can block, or the knight can block the attack. And I don't quite see how to finish it off from this position. You could trade because you're ahead in material, and that's probably fine. But it's not conclusive. Although, Magnus Carlsen once said, I give my opponents lots of opportunities to make mistakes. And while this move isn't ending the game immediately, it could be if black doesn't see it and makes the mistake. So there's some value to making this move anyway, to give your opponent the opportunity to make the mistake. It's definitely not bad for you. Instead we see this, and we throw in a check, and now you can't check a second time because that rook defends that square. You can't take the rook at the end because your bishop, the bishop is eyeing the other rook. So you actually put yourself into a little bit of a quandary here. Um, you can't move your rook out of danger because then black captures this rook. You capture back and you've lost 2 rooks for 1. So, uh, you know, uh, maybe always be closing, but don't always be checking. I don't know. This doesn't quite work. And black sees it and makes the best of a bad situation, grabs the bishop for it, and now has to fight a rook and a knight against 2 rooks. So definitely down. Materials a little bit more even just because white has more pawns. Maybe these center pawns should think about moving down a little bit. Maybe move the knight, start inching the pawns forward. Here we can decide to use the en passant rule. If we choose to take the piece, it flies off the board, and we've straightened out our doubled pawns. We no longer have doubled pawns. Does white take... white sees that. Okay, captures the piece. That move was definitely good for white. White now is still up 1 point. Throws in a check. The only 2 moves to defend the rook in the back are these 2. Picks one of them. And now I wouldn't trade here because take, and you've got a rook versus a knight. It's going to be hard to win the game like that. The rook is still defended, but I probably wouldn't have left it here. I probably would have thrown another check in, get the rooks out of the way of seeing each other. And now black forces the trade. And this rook, while white has advantage in points and pawns, the rook is going to be stronger than the knight, and it's going to be tough. Now, this drops a tactic where knights can be so tricky. If white sees this, white has an opportunity to even the minor pieces and win the game with the pawns. Doesn't see the tactic. Instead, looking to push the pawn. Black doesn't take, and sometimes it's hard to see these non-take options. Pushing. Black here is down to 13 seconds on the clock. Definitely, time management an issue here. This move, though, might encourage white to see the winning fork. It does, and with that, black spends the remainder of the time trying to figure out how to save the pieces, and it's just not possible. You have to move. The knight takes. This is what would have happened. But black realizes potentially that this game is not winnable. Runs down the remaining 13 seconds on the clock, and looks like Joe is our winner for both games and closing out the D bracket. So let's take a look at the board. And we have 2 points for Joe, if I am considering that correctly. And that closes out round 1. Jeffrey automatically moves forward because we had uneven number of participants. And there we go. There's our matchups for the quarterfinals. See you the next one.